Baltimore Ravens fantasy football overview. Here we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media, bringing you daily sports content every single day. If you want to see the daily content, make sure to subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bell as well if you want to get notified every single time I upload a brand new video. Now, in this video today, it's going to be the start of a new series. I'm going to try and do a couple of, full league series as well as divisional series before the start of the season, but I wanted to get fantasy football started first because the fantasy football drafts start before the regular season actually starts, so I can have more time to do the just overall fantasy football analysis before I get into the team analysis, predictions, highs, lows, all that sort of stuff. So that will be coming. But I want to start off with the Ravens. Why? Because this started as a Baltimore Ravens channel. So we're going to get into it. This series is going to consist of me talking about every single player, every single skill position player on the roster, not talking kicker, not talking defense, but it's just my analysis of each player, how I think they're going to turn out if they're being underdrafted, overdrafted, and that sort of thing. So, if you want advice for fantasy football, this is my advice. This is my thoughts. Obviously, I know the most about the Ravens, but I do know all the other teams as well, so don't feel like I only know the Ravens. But starting off, we're going to go with the quarterback, then the running backs, then the receivers, then the tight ends, and we have Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson currently is being drafted 38th, which, is early 4th round in a 12-man league. He's going as quarterback 5. If you know anything about Lamar Jackson, it is he has upside as well as floor in the fantasy football universe. Why? Because fantasy football quarterbacks that are mobile and run, they have that baseline of 70 yards a game, right? 60 yards a game for a guy like Lamar Jackson, which is an automatic 6 or 7 points. The question with him is going to be the touchdowns, because that is where the Ravens offense struggled the last couple of years, was getting those touchdowns. That was underneath Greg Roman. So if Lamar Jackson goes back to that 2019 form where he threw for 36 touchdown passes, he absolutely can be QB1 in the NFL. And that's valuable. But at the same time, he does play quarterback. And I think a lot of people are under the philosophy of you don't want to overdraft a quarterback. I'm under that belief. I'm not a big fan of going after Mahomes or Allen in round 3 or even late 2. That's just not my philosophy. But if you're looking for somebody that has a high floor as well as an explosive ceiling, Lamar Jackson is that guy week to week. But season long is where it gets tricky, because Lamar Jackson last couple of seasons has gotten injured. And so do you want to take that risk? Now, I'm not a big believer in this injury prone unless it's an injury that gets consistently re-aggravated. Something like turf toe. AJ Green would have that, and he had it every year for like 3 years. He'd get it, and he would miss weeks. And it's like, okay, that's because he's re-aggravating the same injury. Whereas Lamar Jackson, he hasn't had the same injury. I don't think he is injury prone. However, he has missed time because when you are a mobile quarterback and you're running a lot more and you're taking more hits, it can happen, brings more opportunity. Again, I love Lamar. I'm a Ravens fan. But, that's the negative side when you're looking at Lamar Jackson. The benefit outside of just the running game, which I've talked about, is he does now have Todd Monken, who wants to throw the football a lot more. He's no longer using Greg Roman. Lamar did get better wide receiver weapons. So the passing game should be a lot better than it has been in recent years. And Lamar Jackson had a pretty darn good passing season in 2019. Again, threw for 36 touchdowns, leading the NFL. That's when he had his QB1 in fantasy season. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Lamar Jackson finished his QB1 if he stays healthy the entire year. It's just, do you want to bank on, that new receiving core and new offensive coordinator? That's the trade-off that you're having. I think QB5 is very fair for him. I think that's a good spot. If you want to go quarterback, relatively early to get a star quarterback, Lamar Jackson is probably the best guy to do that for. Next up is J.K. Dobbins. He's the only running back I'm going to talk about on this list. If you want me to bring up Gus Edwards, he's like a very low end, like our last slot on the bench, type of running back. Maybe your, other running back gets injured or on a bye week and you need to pick someone up. Gus Edwards could be that guy. But J.K. Dobbins right now is going, 50th overall. This is according to Fantasy Pros where all these players are going. 50th overall. He's the 20th running back in the NFL, meaning he is looked at as an RB2. I think that's fair. I think that J.K. Dobbins in recent years has been screwed by Greg Roman which is ironic because the whole thing about Greg Roman was that he helps the run game, and that is true, but he doesn't help individual running backs. J.K. Dobbins was not getting goal line carries under Greg Roman. He wasn't getting, red zone touches, and that really hindered his fantasy performance because he couldn't get the scores. When he came back last year, from the entire missed season, he realized that something wasn't right, and he was struggling not just on the field but in fantasy football. He gets that, fixing surgery, comes back, and he looked dominant. For the end of the season. Anybody that had him in the fantasy football playoffs, they knew he was putting up, 80, 90, 100-yard games, consistently, dominating in that backfield. So J.K. Dobbins right now going around, running back 20, some players around him at that spot are guys like Dameon Pierce in Houston is going as RB19, Joe Mixon at RB18, Aaron Jones at RB17. The only guy I'd really consider him taking over is like maybe Dameon Pierce. Like, I'm not taking him over Mixon. Mixon, the reason he's going so low is the off the field stuff. But like Aaron Jones is someone who's like proven he can be dominant. Some players behind J.K. Dobbins, Rashad White, I'd take J.K. Dobbins over him. DeAndre Swift is going as RB23. Cam Akers RB22. Honestly, Miles Sanders RB21. I think J.K. Dobbins is going in the perfect spot. This is another player where I think he has the right value. If you're sitting there and you need an RB2, or I think better yet, I would more want him as my flex running back rather than using him as an RB2, just because Lamar Jackson is going to take away some goal line touches. The Ravens are going to be running the ball a little bit less. I think J.K. Dobbins will take a lot more snap share this year, but how much of that is going to translate into touchdowns versus yards. Todd Monken likes to throw the football. So I would be weary of like banking on J.K. Dobbins as an RB2, even though that's where he's kind of going. I think of him more as a flex, option this year, which may mean I think he's a little bit overvalued. But, if you end up going running back in round 1, round 2 at the turn or something like that, you go after like Najee Harris and, I don't know, maybe you go Javonte Williams, or, if you want another running back like Derrick Henry, or, something like that at the turn, Tony Pollard, that'll be fine. I have no problem with anybody doing that. So I wouldn't use him as RB2. That's what I would say. I do like him. I think he's going to be good, but not good enough to where I'm banking on that at that second running back position. Now the wide receivers, I'm going to go through it in terms of ADP, but this receiving core, you will tell right away that nobody knows what's going to happen, because their wide receivers are ranked at ADP is 117, 122, 131. People believe in the Ravens wide receivers, but they don't know which Ravens wide receiver to believe in. Bateman, wide receiver 48. Odell Beckham Jr., wide receiver 50. And Zay Flowers is wide receiver 52. Now, the player that I'm not going to get probably under any circumstance is Zay Flowers. And that's because he is a rookie, and it does take a little bit of time to adjust, but he also doesn't appear to be somebody that is a major touchdown guy in year 1 of the Baltimore Ravens offense. And I say that because, he looks to be that new gadget guy, not gadget in terms of only runs, jet sweeps and stuff, but he is a get the ball in his hands. If you're running like, a PPR or something like that, I think he's going to get a lot of targets. I don't think he's going to get a lot of yards. I think he's going to be that, 2nd and 10, quick screen, or that underneath route where maybe he gets a little bit of yak. Not saying he's not going to score touchdowns, but I think the touchdown guy in this group is Odell Beckham Jr. I think that is exactly why the Ravens brought him in, because they have struggled in the red zone. And when Odell went over to the Los Angeles Rams in that Super Bowl run, that's what he was doing. I mean, it was like, okay, you need to throw it up to a guy in the end zone. You're throwing it up to Odell. He has the hands. He is going to be that third down. He is going to be that red zone target for Lamar Jackson outside of Mark Andrews that you can rely on. But with that said, I don't think he's going to put up a ton of yards. I don't think he's going to be taking those, being that guy on the deep shots. I think he's going to be an intermediate guy that scores touchdowns where, right now at wide receiver 50, that's seen in a 12-man league. That's, outside of a wide receiver 4 or that is a wide receiver 4. Wide receiver 4, if you're playing in a 3 wide receiver flex league, that could be a starting flex option. I wouldn't be mad at Odell Beckham Jr. at the flex, or if you're in a double flex league, I think it would be very fine. I would not want any of these wide receivers on my start as a starting wide receiver. And Rashad Bateman, I didn't talk about him yet. I think he is going to be the yards guy. I think Lamar Jackson showed that he does at least have some good chemistry with Bateman on the deep threats. I think Bateman, when he was playing last year, he looked pretty solid. He was getting a lot of reception. He was getting a lot of yards. He was a decent fantasy option until the injury of himself and then the injury of Lamar Jackson. He was putting up good numbers. But it's too risky in my opinion. And I wouldn't want multiple on the team because I think this offense is centered around one guy outside of Lamar, the passing offense, and that's Mark Andrews. Let's talk about him next because he is the guy that I am like targeting in fantasy football drafts. He's going 34th overall, number 2 tight end because number 1 is obviously Travis Kelce. But if you're looking at all around the most important position in fantasy football, a lot of people will say tight end. Because if you don't have a good tight end, you're putting up like 5 points a week, 6 points a week out of that position. Whereas if you do have an elite tight end, you're putting up 11 or 12. If you have Travis Kelce, you're putting up like 18. And it's really annoying to go against. So a lot of people target that position and Mark Andrews as an early 3rd round or really, it's just 3rd round player. I think Mark Andrews is an absolutely perfect player to go after because he has the chemistry with Lamar Jackson. The offense is going to be passing more, which means more opportunities for Mark. And there's also now more wide receivers, which means defenses won't be able to focus in on him nearly as much as they have in the past. Because you go up against the Ravens and it was just like, stop Mark. I mean, he's going next to somebody like DK Metcalf, who is an up and down boom or bust fantasy player that just added Jackson Smith and Jigba and is still utilizing, Geno Smith at quarterback. You have Tyler Lockett there. You have, a new running back in Zach Charbonnet alongside Kenneth Walker, who's going to be able to play the entire season. It's assumed, last year he didn't get to play very much until, the second half. I mean, if you're looking at like those two, like, why are you not going Mark Andrews, right? That is somebody where he is the focal point of Lamar Jackson. That's where he's looking to go. That's where Mark Andrews gets touchdowns. He gets yards. He gets big plays. He gets a lot of targets. He is the 3rd down guy. Yes, they brought in Odell, and he's going to help with the red zone. But in reality, Mark Andrews is the guy in this offense. The only 2 players that I am like, go for it, absolutely target them, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews. If you can get the stack, that's also very good because, again, when Lamar throws touchdowns, you can expect it to be to Mark Andrews. That's the biggest thing. So, I do like the Baltimore Ravens for fantasy for those 2 players, but, it's a gamble. I think one of the Ravens wide receivers will turn into a potential wide receiver 2 in fantasy. But is it really worth guessing? I mean, it's really a 33% chance that you get one of them right. And instead, you could go with a safer option like an Adam Thielen, who's probably just going to be a wide receiver 2, maybe even the wide receiver 1 in Carolina for a rookie quarterback that needs to find somebody to check it down to, right? You're looking at other wide receivers. You can look at, Donovan Peoples-Jones, the wide receiver 2 in Cleveland. He has chemistry, and what he's going to bring. There's boom with the Ravens wide receivers, but there's also a high chance of bust because a lot of weeks it may just be like, oh, they each put up 6 fantasy points. And you don't really want that, in a starting wide receiver, maybe as a flex. But let me know in the comment section down below if you guys are targeting these players, if there's any players that you think I missed. I'll also mention if you draft Mark Andrews, draft Isaiah Likely as well. In the later rounds as a backup tight end, he dominated when Mark Andrews missed time. He looked very good. I think he's a very good receiving option at the tight end position. Don't ever start him. But if Mark Andrews does happen to miss a game due to injury or illness or anything like that, Isaiah Likely is a good option to fill in for him if you have enough bench slots to hold him. But let me know what other teams you want me to do next. Do you want me to go by division? Do you want me to go just by, random teams? I'll have guests on as well, talking about it. So if there's a team that you want me to talk about and a specific YouTuber or content creator or just person you want me to talk to, let me know. And I'll try and reach out to them and I'll try and get them on the show so that we can talk about their team and their fantasy football players. But thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe for daily content. And I'll see all of you again tomorrow. And most importantly, happy 4th of July.